Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, E-Steam: The Sands of Time. It's action and adventure in ancient Egypt in this terrific teen time travel romance. Get your copy of E-Steam: The Sands of Time at your favorite online bookseller today. There's been a series of conflicting reports to why Netflix canceled this incredibly popular and profitable Luke Cage series. Now, the official reason that Netflix and Disney are giving for the cancellation of the Luke Cage series is quote unquote creative differences. Now, others have speculated that the Luke Cage series was canceled due to Netflix having financial issues, which I find to be quite questionable if they could go out of their way to have resources to renew an incredibly terrible series like Jessica Jones Season 3. So that shows me that they really don't have any sort of financial issues as related to Netflix on that side of the coin. And there's other reports saying that Disney canceled Luke Cage and Iron Fist in order to free up cash for its upcoming merger with Fox. And I find that argument to not wash because Disney should be rife with cash after making over $1 billion on Black Panther, $2 billion on Avengers Infinity War, and a couple of $100 million on Ant-Man and the Wasp, not to mention other smaller movies that came out this summer. So when I look at Disney, their argument about trying to free up cash, it just doesn't wash with me as related to the financial situation related to the Disney Corporation. And when I listen to these arguments and flimsy excuses, they make the whole creative differences argument really sound more about narrative than about anything related to creativity. Because when you take a critical look at Netflix's Luke Cage series ran completely counter to every presentation of black men in mainstream media, and especially those images of black men that were presented in Disney's media. So I believe personally that the real reason why your Luke Cage was canceled was because Luke Cage, the series, did not reflect the image and the narrative that the Walt Disney Corporation wanted to see regarding black men. Because when you take a look at this programming, it's all designed to program an idea in people's minds regarding black people. And what the Disney Corporation, as I've said in previous videos, had was an issue with the way black men were presented in media on their platform. Now, Disney had no problem with the Black Panther when he was making over $700 million at the box office in America and another $300 or $400 million abroad. And the reason why they had no problem with the Black Panther was because he was a gynocentric perception of black men. And under the gynocentric perception of black men, he was a man who submitted to female authority, submitted to female authority figures, and followed female authority figures, and never took the lead as a man is supposed to under God's natural order. Whereas Luke Cage presented you an image of a strong, heterosexual, masculine black man who was taking the lead as related to God's natural order and doing things on his terms. And this, I believe, was the issue that Disney executives had with Luke Cage because he was presenting you with a strong image of black masculinity, black manhood, and showing us a model for black leadership. And that's a program that the Disney Corporation did not want reflected in media on its platform or Netflix's platform because they believe that that type of model for manhood would inspire other young black men, because a lot of young black men were watching this series, and even some white men were watching this series, and they were seeing this model for manhood and seeing it as something that would inspire them to be strong, masculine black men and strong, masculine white men. A lot of men watched that series and they loved that season 2 and they loved seeing a positive image of actual masculinity. But the Disney Corporation considers that toxic masculinity, and that's why they did not, I believe, want this Luke Cage series to continue on with season 3, because what Chio Hodari Coker was setting up in Luke Cage season 3 was Luke Cage becoming a power man, but he was becoming a power man from a black man's perspective. And that was something that I believe the Disney Corporation was incredibly uncomfortable with. What's happened with Luke Cage is very similar to what happened with Disney's Gargoyles back in the 1990s. Now, I remember Disney's Gargoyles back in the 1990s because it starred Keith David and Sally Richardson, two black actors, in the lead roles as Goliath and Elisa Maza. And the series was about how this Xanatos, who represented, as I believe, white supremacy, took the Gargoyles castle and put it on top of his building, and Goliath wanting to get his castle back because it was his property. Now, I always saw a metaphor between black people and the Gargoyles on Disney's Gargoyles, and I always saw how the Gargoyles were out to protect the white people, similar to the way the slaves were on the plantation. And as the Gargoyles were forced away from their home, they had help from Elisa Maza, who was a black woman, and the whole series was looking like it was going in a direction towards where Goliath was going to have this final confrontation with Xanatos over this castle. But at the end of season 2, where we had the revelation of Goliath's daughter, and then the final confrontation between Goliath, the Gargoyle, Xanatos, and Avalon, we got this compromise at the end of season 2 where they would live together in the castle. And then season 3 came along with the Goliath Chronicles, and we got this completely emasculated Goliath. We got these neutered stories, and we got this really underdeveloped characterizations, and even some characterizations were completely changed because you had Demona, who was acting completely out of character, and you could tell that everybody went away from Greg Weisman's original vision for Gargoyles, which was about making that commentary about black people in between the lines of the story of Gargoyles, to this Disney executives came in, compromised these characters, and then neutered those characters. And that's what I see what they wanted to do with Luke Cage, because Luke Cage looked like it was already headed towards a season 3. Chio Hodari Coker was already writing scripts, and he was dealing with interference from these Disney executives who wanted to change the story. And I believe what they wanted to do was something very similar to what was done to Disney's Gargoyles, because I know a lot of Gargoyles fans out there. They do not like season 3. I remember sitting there watching season 3 and just going, this is not what I used to watch on Disney Afternoon, because what I used to watch on Disney Afternoon was a completely different show. It was all the Gargoyles, again, they really reminded me of black people. And then you have this compromise, and then we get Uncle Goliath's Cabin, as I call it, for season 3 of the Goliath Chronicles, a hot mess of a show. And I believe that's what they wanted to do with Luke Cage, because what they did with Gargoyles, again, was change the narrative of the story, because Disney executives were uncomfortable with a black narrative in a series. Because when I saw Keith David and Sally Richardson as the lead in Gargoyles, I was saying to myself, yeah, this is a series making a commentary on black people. And when I look at Luke Cage and I look at Chio Hodari Coker, I clearly see that he was making a commentary about black culture and black life, and telling a story from a black man's perspective in the first 2 seasons of Luke Cage. And that, again, made a lot of those white people uncomfortable when you started to see Luke Cage starting to take power in this series. Now, they had no problem with Luke Cage back when he was breathing brand new life into old stereotypes on Jessica Jones as this big black buck who was just Jessica Jones's sexual fetish and this womanizing character. But when Cheo Hodari Coker decided to bring his vision into the Luke Cage character, rewrite that character not to reflect Marvel's narrative, but to reflect a narrative as related to black men and men overall, that's when Marvel started to have a problem. And that's when they started to have a serious problem when we started to see this black man facing off against not only the institutions that were damaging the black community, the Democratic Party, which was represented by Mariah Stokes, and the criminal element, which was represented by Cottonmouth. Now, they really didn't have too much of a problem with Cottonmouth, but they had a problem with the commentary made about Mariah Stokes, who was a Democrat, and they also had a problem with the commentary also made about Luke's father, the black pastor. Again, these are institutions that every black person knows is a problem in the black community. And Cheo Hodari Coker, in his cage, was making commentary on those institutions that were destroying the community. And the last couple episodes where he really made those commentaries about how destructive black women were, again, that really made a lot of the gynocentrists who work at Disney extremely uncomfortable, because here you had a black producer showing us a story that was really telling a lot of truth about what's going on in the black community. And then as we saw him taking on that white mob, as the power void was filling in Luke Cage season 2 after Mariah had died, we really started to see, I believe, those Disney executives starting to become uncomfortable, because when you saw Luke Cage taking on white supremacy and going face to face with white supremacy, that's what terrified a lot of those people. And when they saw that finale again, with him becoming the power man who was checking black women, being a leader and an authority figure, again, this is where Disney, I believe, started to have a problem. And that's when they started to really go after Netflix, because it wasn't an issue of financial problems for Disney when they went out of their way to give Kathleen Kennedy, who had already destroyed the entire Star Wars franchise, a renewal on her contract. Because I really do not believe that whole argument talking about no one wants to touch Star Wars. I would go out here and take on Star Wars if Disney offered it to me, because I see a way to rebuild the entire Star Wars brand. But I believe that they want to just give it to Kathleen Kennedy because, again, they're doubling down on gynocentrism and the whole concept of continuing this whole concept of girl power, something that they promoted in Iron Fist season 2. And I believe that whole girl power narrative is the same reason why Jessica Jones is getting a season 3 on Netflix, even in the aftermath of a poorly rated and disastrous season 2, which was just so poorly written and disjointed. But it's only being put there because it has an image of an so-called empowered female and fits the identity politics narrative that the Disney Corporation wants to push regarding strong women that we know had fallen completely apart in Jessica Jones season 2 and Iron Fist season 2, because as it relates to these heroines, they don't have any strength of character, and that's what makes people not relate to or identify with those characters. In the same way, 25 years ago, many people related to Elisa Maza. Because when you look at Elisa Maza, she showed strength of character by standing up against Xanatos, standing up to Goliath, and standing up for the people of New York, in spite of all of the obstacles and circumstances that she faced. And that's the big problem with Disney right now, is that they want to make these strong heroines based on the whole idea of the flash of feminism without the substance of the character development that we saw with Disney's Gargoyles. And that's the reason why many of their heroines fail, because they want to push them, and they want to push them at the expense of the male heroes. And what they want to do with the Luke Cage character, again, was they wanted to try to force all of the gynocentrism that they did, like they did in Iron Fist, into the Luke Cage series, and they want to emasculate the character. Unfortunately, Shio Hodari Coker did push back, and I'm very proud of him for doing that. And even though the series got canceled, it maintained its integrity. But who doesn't maintain their integrity is the Disney Corporation, because they're sitting here making all sorts of excuses to cover up their gynocentrism and their racism, because those are the only two reasons I believe Luke Cage did not get the season 3 that it deserved. The only reason I believe Luke Cage got canceled was, again, it did not fit their narrative, because they're sitting there talking about Netflix doesn't have any money to make series, yet they had money to make Jessica Jones season 3, and your Disney Corporation, who was saying that they need to free up cash for other things, had made over $3 billion on Marvel Studios movies, and they were willing to continue renewing Kathleen Kennedy's contract. So that shows me that there is plenty of money for the things that they want that fit their narrative, similar to how your Marvel Comics has plenty of money to continue publishing comics that sell poorly, like the Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel, Domino, and many other Marvel comics, which routinely sell poorly at Marvel and would have been canceled under an editor like Jim Shooter, but are allowed to remain under C.B. Cebulski because they fit the forced diversity narrative they're trying to push. So this is not about profits, it's about, or finances, it is about narrative. And those creative differences that they are trying to say are the reasons for Luke Cage's cancellation, they all relate to narrative. And it's all about presenting a narrative that makes the white executives at the Disney Corporation feel comfortable about the black image and feel comfortable about the characters they created for the black image. And this is why I'm telling everyone that they cannot rely on white corporations like the Disney Corporation to be able to influence your image of yourself, because they want to see a certain story regarding black men and black women, and they want to see the story they feel comfortable seeing, not the story that tells the truth about us. And when I look at this whole Luke Cage situation again, it reinforces the case for black-owned black media and for black people to go out of their way to support black-owned black media. Because if it wasn't for black-owned black media like I produce on the SJS Direct imprint, we would not be able to see those balanced, humanized images. It was a miracle that Shio Hodari Coker was able to get what he did in Luke Cage through, and I doubt we're going to ever see that again on a mainstream platform like Netflix. And I believe the only way we're going to see that type of image is if we make it ourselves, because companies like Disney, they don't want those images out there, and they'll say that they can't put them out there because of creative differences, but their creative difference is just the same old racism being repackaged in a brand new box. And that racism is all about making sure that the images of black people reflect the racist stereotypes that make white people feel comfortable and make white racists feel comfortable about themselves. And I'm going to take something back and say not all white people feel this way about black people, because a lot of white people watched that Luke Cage series, and a lot of white people learned from that Luke Cage series, and a lot of white people wanted to see that. It's the white racists at the top who want to continue promoting and perpetuating these stereotypes and promoting these stereotypes as a social norm, and they want to see that type of stereotyping because, again, they're not comfortable with the idea of a balanced, humanized black man, and they're not comfortable with a black man having power on the same level as a white man. And that's why they had a problem with Luke Cage, and that's why they wanted to get Luke Cage off the air, because they could not find a way to change Chio Hodari Coker's adaptation of Luke Cage back into the stereotype that he was in the 1970s. And I guarantee you, if they do launch a so-called Power Man and Iron Fist on the streaming service, it's going to feature different actors, one, and two, it'll probably feature all the stereotypes that we all know that these people like to see. So I'm not expecting much if Disney does go that way, because they're going to change the narrative, they're going to change the story, and it's going to be changed to reflect their views, just like your Black Panther reflected the gynocentric view of black men, the one that every black women and white men are comfortable with, not the images that black men and many other men around the world wanted to see when they were watching Luke Cage Season 2. So when I listen to that argument talking about creative differences, again, when they say creative differences, I think creative differences is just another way to say racism. And if they're going to present racism as the standard on these Disney superhero shows, then I think I need to find something else to watch. I'm launching a new book this week, E-Steam, The Sands of Time, and this is a powerful teen time travel romance. And I really want to get the sales up on this book. I would like to have 10 sales by the end of the week. So if you could do me a favor, you could buy the book on paperback and Kindle. I would greatly appreciate it. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.